2 embassies, 2 countries, minutes apart. That wasn't anger, that was control. While the world counted bodies, the people who planned it were already gone, moving through passports, money, and lies. The bombers died on impact, the system didn't. And the most dangerous part of the attack wasn't the explosion. It was how cleanly it disappeared. August 7, 1998, began like any other in Nairobi, Kenya, and Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. The US embassies in both cities were situated in central, busy areas. In Nairobi, the embassy was located amidst office blocks and busy streets, while in Dar es Salaam, it was more exposed, but less congested. Both embassies relied on security measures, local cooperation, and early detection to prevent threats. By mid-morning, that assumption was shattered by violent events that would have far-reaching consequences. At 10:30 a.m., in Nairobi, a truck carrying a large bomb approached the embassy. The attackers attempted to force their way through the perimeter, with gunfire and a grenade. The embassy's security responded quickly, blocking the vehicle, but the bomb was detonated near the entrance. The truck bomb exploded outside the embassy, causing widespread destruction, shattering glass, collapsing walls, and turning debris into projectiles. The blast impacted surrounding structures, turning the area into a field of rubble. The explosion in Nairobi sent glass shards across the streets and into offices. Concrete blocks fractured, and nearby vehicles were destroyed. The embassy's interior was reduced to rubble, and the area was filled with debris and dust, obstructing visibility and causing breathing difficulties. A nearby building collapsed, trapping people beneath the rubble. The blast's devastation was compounded by Nairobi's crowded streets, with most victims being Kenyans. Approximately 213 people were killed, and over 4,000 were injured, including 12 Americans. In response, survivors navigated the debris, carrying the injured to safer areas. Emergency responders rushed to the site, where triage was performed on the street, and at overwhelmed hospitals. Medical facilities were quickly overwhelmed, struggling to treat burn victims, shrapnel injuries, and severe wounds from the blast. Around 10:40 a.m., a second truck bomb exploded outside the US Embassy in Dar es Salaam. The timing of the 2 attacks indicated a coordinated effort. The bomber in Dar es Salaam was stopped by security measures before reaching the embassy, but the blast still caused casualties, though less destructive than the Nairobi attack. 11 people were killed, and over 70 injured. The central impact of the attacks was clear. Both embassies had been targeted by vehicle bombs in near synchronization. Across both countries, the combined toll was 224 dead and over 4,500 injured. The injured were visible in hospital corridors, sidewalks, and vehicles pressed into service as ambulances. Rescue teams moved through rubble in Nairobi, searching for survivors, but recovery soon turned grim, as bodies were removed. The bombings were recognized as not just mass murder but attacks on US sovereignty, meant to broadcast power beyond East Africa. The US government treated the bombings as both humanitarian emergencies and federal crime scenes. The FBI mobilized immediately, recognizing the international scope of the attacks. Within days, over 900 FBI agents were deployed to assist in evidence recovery, victim identification, and the pursuit of those responsible. FBI teams arrived at the still dangerous sites, where buildings were unstable and fires had weakened structures. The air was thick with dust, and investigators worked in heat and debris, carefully preserving evidence, documenting victim locations, and tagging key fragments for future analysis. Dar es Salaam scene required similar procedures, with severe structural damage and ongoing coordination with local authorities. Access was controlled, and the FBI ensured that evidence collection followed strict procedures for both technical analysis and legal purposes. In Nairobi, victim identification was a challenge due to the volume of deaths. FBI disaster victim identification specialists coordinated with local authorities to use fingerprints, dental records, and personal effects to identify the victims, building a record that could support future prosecutions. As the investigation progressed, it became clear that the attacks were coordinated by an international terrorist organization. The timing, coinciding with the 8th anniversary of American forces' arrival in Saudi Arabia, suggested the bombings were meant to send a message to the US. The FBI formalized the investigation under the operational names KENBOM for Kenya and TANBOM for Tanzania, ensuring separate evidence streams while building a comprehensive picture of the attack. Evidence pointed to al-Qaeda, expanding the investigation to include the planners and leaders behind the operation. The pursuit of suspects required speed, as terrorist attacks lead to chaotic movement. Within 20 days, Kenyan authorities and international partners arrested key suspects, Mohammed Sadiq Ode and Mohammed Rash Daoud al-Awali, signaling the attackers' reliance on local logistics that could be traced. The arrests expanded the investigation. Operatives pointed to broader networks, leading to Mamdouh Mahmoud Salim's arrest in Germany and Wadi al-Hajjah's arrest in the US. Both arrests highlighted connections between the bombings and individuals with ties to the US. The network spanned multiple countries and jurisdictions. Less than 2 weeks after the bombings, the US launched cruise missile strikes in Afghanistan and Sudan, targeting al-Qaeda infrastructure in an operation known as Operation Infinite Reach. The strikes aimed at disrupting the network but failed to resolve the long-term threat, underscoring the need for continued investigation. On November 4, 1998, an indictment named Osama bin Laden and several members of his network, marking a critical point in the legal response to the bombings. The indictment provided a framework for pursuing suspects and establishing the crime as a targeted act of terrorism, with identifiable perpetrators. By the end of 1998, the investigation had reshaped U.S. approaches to terrorism, demonstrating urgency and capability. The bombings exposed vulnerabilities in diplomatic facilities and highlighted the need for better security, readiness, and response. In Nairobi and Dar es Salaam, recovery continued as buildings were rebuilt, medical systems treated survivors, and families sought closure. The FBI's work expanded into years of pursuit and trials. The initial focus was on recovering evidence and identifying the dead before the network restructured. The embassy bombings of August 7, 1998, revealed that diplomatic missions could be mass casualty targets in seconds. The response involved urgent evidence collection, identification of victims, and a global counter-terrorism effort. The story begins with the immediate aftermath of the blasts, as the US and its partners turned devastation into evidence. The minutes following the explosion in Nairobi were chaotic. Dust filled the air, reducing visibility to just a few meters. Survivors moved instinctively, some fleeing, others seeking help. Car alarms blared, and distant sirens struggled to break through the noise, while debris continued to settle. The embassy was now a collapsed structure, its walls, rooms, and interiors exposed. Inside, survivors, both staff and visitors, moved without direction. Some navigated stairwells, while others emerged through holes in walls. The injured were taken to open areas, away from collapsing structures. The distinction between embassy personnel and civilians quickly disappeared as the blast indiscriminately affected all. Outside, the destruction extended beyond the embassy. Buildings lost facades, offices were exposed, and furniture and papers were scattered. Vehicles were crushed or overturned, and pedestrians were thrown to the ground or trapped under debris. Many lay motionless, while others tried to move but collapsed from their injuries. Local emergency forces, including police and firefighters, moved toward the blast zone despite the risks. Ambulances quickly became overwhelmed, and all types of vehicles were used to transport the injured. Drivers followed crowds and instinctively moved toward hospitals. Hospitals were overwhelmed, with emergency rooms overflowing. Staff triaged patients in corridors and makeshift areas. Many victims had deep lacerations from glass, burns, or crush injuries. Blood supplies ran low, and medical staff worked relentlessly to treat the overwhelming number of casualties. In Dar es Salaam, the response mirrored Nairobi's but on a smaller scale. The embassy was damaged, and both embassy staff and civilians were injured. The attacks were quickly recognized as coordinated, and communications between local governments and the US intensified. The US government immediately classified the bombings as international terrorism. The FBI led the investigation despite the distance from US soil. The Bureau activated its overseas response protocols, assembling a specialized team of counter-terrorism agents, explosives experts, forensic analysts, and disaster response units. Aircraft were prepared to transport personnel and equipment to East Africa. The logistics were complex, with teams needing to be self-sufficient, carrying protective gear, forensic tools, and communication equipment. The FBI coordinated with the U.S. Department of State, the Department of Defense, and foreign governments to secure access, permissions, and protection. Time was critical, as evidence degrades quickly, and debris movement could obscure forensic indicators. When FBI personnel arrived in Nairobi, the city was still in shock. The blast zone was cordoned off, but perimeters were difficult to maintain due to the scale of destruction. Thousands gathered, including searchers, volunteers, and onlookers. Security forces managed access, while allowing recovery operations to continue. The FBI integrated with local authorities to ensure operational effectiveness and long-term legitimacy. The embassy site was immediately designated a crime scene, transitioning from rescue to investigation. Investigators worked to balance urgency with preservation, documenting areas before debris removal. Heavy equipment was used carefully to avoid destroying evidence. Measurements were taken to map the blast center, revealing how the explosion spread. Explosives experts focused on identifying the bomb's type and size. Fragments of metal, wiring, and vehicle remains were collected and cataloged. Engine parts and chassis fragments provided leads, helping trace the bomb's construction and linking it to known techniques. Victim identification teams faced challenges due to the number of casualties. Many victims had no identification, and some were disfigured. FBI specialists worked with Kenyan authorities to collect fingerprints, dental information, and personal effects. This slow, emotional process was essential for restoring dignity to the dead and providing certainty to families. As the investigation expanded, intelligence indicated the attacks were part of a coordinated terrorist operation. The use of vehicle bombs, the targeting of U.S. missions, and the timing across two countries suggested centralized planning. Analysts noted similarities in the attack's execution and intent. The FBI formalized the investigation under the operational names KENBOM for Kenya and TANBOM for Tanzania. These separate but unified efforts allowed teams to manage evidence and coordination, while feeding information into a single framework. Local cooperation was critical. Kenyan and Tanzanian authorities provided access, security, and cultural knowledge. Joint teams conducted interviews, managed evidence, and coordinated actions. The FBI worked integrated with local authorities to ensure the investigation was a shared effort. As the weeks passed, the operation intensified. Over 900 FBI agents were involved at various stages, supported by staff handling logistics and analysis. Evidence was sent to laboratories for further examination, and patterns pointed toward known extremist networks operating across borders. The urgency of the investigation stemmed from the need for accountability and the concern that the perpetrators might attempt further attacks. Intelligence assessments indicated that networks capable of synchronized bombings could adapt quickly, shaping the investigation's aggressive approach. International partners were engaged, and legal frameworks for arrests and extraditions were activated early to prevent suspects from escaping. The first arrests in Kenya, made within 20 days, showed the effectiveness of the early response. Mohammed Sadiq Ode and Mohammed Rash Daoud al-Awali were arrested, marking the transition from site investigation to operational pursuit. Their capture proved the network had left traceable evidence, and that international cooperation could yield results. However, the arrests highlighted that the conspiracy was larger and required sustained effort to dismantle. By the end of the initial phase, the investigation had become one of the FBI's most complex counterterrorism cases, spanning continents, legal systems, and intelligence domains. It required balancing humanitarian needs with forensic precision and speed with accuracy. The bomb sites remained focal points, but the investigation expanded into financial networks, travel routes, and ideological structures supporting global violence. The first phase concluded with the realization that the attacks were part of a broader conflict. The evidence collected formed the basis for future indictments and trials. But in the early days, the focus was on preserving the truth, identifying the dead, and pursuing those responsible for an act that would change counterterrorism forever. As rescue operations slowed, the bomb sites in Nairobi and Dar es Salaam became permanent investigative environments. In Nairobi, the crime scene spanned multiple blocks, with security forces managing perimeters against the pressure of crowds. In Dar es Salaam, the scene was more contained, but the goal remained the same: secure the area and systematically turn rubble into proof. The FBI quickly expanded its presence, with agents arriving in rotating groups and bringing equipment to document the crime scene and build a long-term case. Evidence collection was carefully structured, with each item labeled, photographed, and tracked to ensure chain of custody was maintained. Every misstep could become a vulnerability in court. Years later, in Nairobi, the investigation operated alongside the ongoing recovery effort. Rescue teams continued to search for survivors under collapsed structures, and investigators had to carefully coordinate to prevent heavy equipment from destroying forensic evidence. Documentation procedures were tightened to preserve key details before any movement occurred. Reconstructing the blast's mechanics was a key priority. Investigators mapped damage patterns to identify the detonation point and direction of force. They examined fragment distribution and the remains of the vehicle, recovering serial numbers and manufacturing identifiers to trace the bomb's construction and suppliers. Parallel to physical evidence collection, witness interviews were conducted systematically. Thousands of potential witnesses, guards, drivers, office workers, and pedestrians were interviewed to build a coherent timeline. Discrepancies were handled carefully, and the goal was to extract consistent details about the bomb vehicle, timing, and movements. Victim identification became a critical part of the investigation, especially in Nairobi with the high number of fatalities. In Nairobi, the dense environment meant the damage extended far beyond the embassy. Investigators examined shattered offices and collapsed sections to track bomb components. As fragments could be scattered over a wide area, the search was slow but thorough, with each new discovery potentially offering a vital link. Meanwhile, the FBI assisted in identifying American victims, working with families and government agencies. Investigators remained focused on building a prosecutable case, while the emotional weight of the scene persisted due to constant exposure to the aftermath. In the following weeks, breakthroughs emerged. Travel records and witness testimony began to converge on key suspects. With intelligence supporting these leads, the urgency of the investigation pushed it toward action, as suspects could flee or change identities. The first shift in the investigation came when the blast sites began to reveal a measurable pattern. The FBI and partner agencies moved from securing perimeters to treating the scenes as technical documents. Every piece of damage, from cracks in concrete to fragments of shrapnel, became data. The goal was not just to understand what happened, but to reconstruct the attack with enough precision to withstand courtroom scrutiny. The bomb's fingerprint was distributed across streets, surfaces, and debris, forming the investigative foundation. In Nairobi, the crater and perimeter were studied in detail. Investigators analyzed the detonation point, which explained the embassy's collapse, the surrounding structure's failure, and the spread of injuries. The blast reach was amplified by the embassy's urban location, impacting public streets and nearby buildings. The larger the bomb, the more likely it required organized procurement and assembly, which indicated a network of support. Evidence recovery teams sifted through debris carefully, treating every fragment as potentially vital. Metal pieces, wiring, and vehicle components were preserved. And even when the bomb vehicle was unrecognizable, parts like engine blocks could be traced. These fragments served as anchors, linking the blast to purchase records, theft reports, or cross-border movement. In Dar es Salaam, the investigation followed the same method, but in a different context. The embassy was not surrounded by high-rise buildings, and the bomb detonated outside, leading to less destruction. The standoff distance influenced how the blast impacted the building, resulting in fewer casualties. This conclusion was backed by physical evidence, including less structural collapse and fewer glass storms. As reconstruction progressed, the investigation revealed that 2 large vehicle bombs were used in a coordinated attack. The focus shifted to identifying who had the capability to plan, supply, and deploy operatives across 2 countries in synchronized timing. Blast sites provided insight into what happened, but not who did it. For that, investigators needed context, travel records, communications, finances, and known patterns. The FBI's investigation relied on integrating physical forensics with intelligence and international cooperation. Evidence was securely documented and analyzed, while agents built link charts connecting suspects, phone numbers, addresses, and known networks. Discipline was crucial, as terrorism investigations often face rumors and false leads. Every lead was treated as provisional until corroborated by traceable evidence. Witness work evolved as time passed. Initial statements were based on sensory recollections, but investigators later focused on witnesses who had interacted with the perimeter before detonation: guards, embassy security, and nearby workers. Interviews were repeated, timelines tightened, and witness details helped clarify whether there were additional attackers and if the bomb vehicle had paused or coordinated with other operatives. Witnesses provided the living record of the attack's real-time events. The investigations in Kenya and Tanzania, though geographically split, increasingly operated as a single case. Evidence and patterns shared between the scenes pointed to a coordinated operation, suggesting coordinated leadership. Agents exchanged findings, evaluated evidence types, and tracked logistical connections, such as travel between countries and ties to extremist facilitators. As the investigation progressed, al-Qaeda became the primary suspect. The conclusion developed from the alignment of intelligence, network reporting, and the operational sophistication of the bombings. The name Osama bin Laden emerged as central, with agencies comparing the bombings to previous threats and the growth of al-Qaeda's infrastructure in the 1990s. The investigation relied on converging lines of evidence rather than a single data source. Al-Qaeda's decentralized structure shaped the next phase of the investigation. Rather than focusing on a single mastermind, the FBI targeted operatives and facilitators who could be located and detained to build a broader legal case. Arrests in foreign jurisdictions required careful timing, legal preparation, and coordination with host nations. The FBI deployment grew to over 900 agents, with additional staff managing the operation's scale. Large evidence fields and witness populations required extensive resources for interviews, evidence packaging, and maintaining chain of custody. Logistics also demanded constant coordination for housing, security, and communications. Prosecutors began shaping the legal path forward, focusing on conspiracy charges to address the entire operation. Evidence from the blast sites showed what happened, while travel, financial, and communication records revealed how. Identifying participants and their roles was the slowest and most difficult part. While the investigation continued, the U.S. also launched a military response. On August 20, 1998, cruise missiles struck targets in Afghanistan and Sudan, adding urgency to the investigation. The strikes aimed to disrupt al-Qaeda but also shifted the network, forcing operatives to adapt. The investigation continued with the expectation that the network would change its tactics. In September 1998, Mamdouh Mohammed Salim was arrested in Germany, confirming the conspiracy's transnational reach. That same month, Wadi El-Hajj, an American citizen, was arrested for making false statements during questioning, showing the conspiracy's connections within the U.S. The bombings were now recognized as a global operation. The legal framework accelerated, and on November 4, 1998, Osama bin Laden and several members of his network were indicted. This formalized the US government's case that the bombings were the product of bin Laden's terrorist network and established a legal path for extradition and future prosecution. By late August 1998, the investigation moved beyond the bomb sites to airports, border crossings, financial records, and other logistical systems. The focus shifted from understanding the attacks to preventing escape and identifying the full network behind the bombings. The most dangerous phase now was tracking surviving operatives as they attempted to disappear or reposition themselves. In Kenya, the arrest of Mohammed Sadiq Odeh and Mohammed Rash Dawood Alawali intensified the investigation. Their arrests provided leverage, and every detail about their movements and contacts became critical. Investigators reconstructed their travel histories, examined safe houses, and collected evidence from discarded items like receipts and phone records to uncover the broader conspiracy. The investigation required rapid legal coordination. Kenyan authorities worked closely with US officials to ensure proper procedures for detention, evidence documentation, and eventual transfer to the US. Any misstep could jeopardize future prosecution, so the FBI integrated seamlessly with local authorities. The search expanded across borders, with investigators tracking individuals who had traveled through multiple countries. By examining airline manifests, passport records, and immigration databases, they sought to map the routes and support systems that facilitated the attackers' movement. The investigation showed that logistics were just as telling as ideology in modern terrorism cases. Financial analysis became increasingly important. Investigators traced money flows linked to operatives, looking at bank transfers, cash movements, and informal financial systems. The FBI worked with financial intelligence units and foreign authorities to identify relevant transactions, with each confirmed transaction adding weight to the case. Witness interviews shifted focus to those who had interacted with suspects before the attack. Investigators sought landlords, employers, neighbors, and acquaintances who might have noticed significant behavior. Many witnesses hadn't realized the importance of what they saw until after the bombings, and investigators worked to build trust and explain the value of seemingly trivial details. In September 1998, German authorities arrested Mumdo Mahmoud Salim, a senior al-Qaeda figure, expanding the investigation into Europe. His arrest confirmed that the embassy bombings were part of a transnational network with operational elements spread across continents. Meanwhile, domestic efforts intensified. In Arlington, Texas, Wadi El-Haj, an American citizen, became a key figure. His arrest for making false statements revealed that the conspiracy had infiltrated American society, not just foreign operatives targeting U.S. interests abroad. This realization had profound implications for U.S. counterterrorism policy. As arrests mounted, the FBI faced the challenge of managing a growing body of evidence. Each suspect brought new data that had to be cross-referenced. Analytical teams built association charts to connect individuals to locations, events, and resources, guiding investigations and shaping charges to reflect the conspiracy's full scope. By this stage, the separation between KENBOM and TANBOM was mostly administrative. Evidence increasingly overlapped, revealing the two bombings as part of a single operation. While a unified conspiracy could be charged comprehensively, it required a higher evidentiary standard to prove shared intent across multiple countries. Security concerns remained high, as investigators assumed the network might attempt further attacks. FBI personnel worked with local security forces to reduce vulnerability, securing evidence processing facilities. The risk of further violence was real, as the bombings had shown the perpetrators' willingness to strike heavily guarded targets. The US government responded on multiple levels. While the FBI built the criminal case, military and intelligence agencies assessed the broader al-Qaeda threat. The August 1998 cruise missile strikes were part of this assessment, adding urgency but also complexity. Military action could alter the investigation, forcing suspects to move or destroy evidence. By autumn, a comprehensive legal case began to take shape. Prosecutors focused on conspiracy statutes to present the bombings as part of a coordinated plan. Evidence was needed to show intent, coordination, and contribution, supported by documentation, testimony, and forensic findings. On November 4, 1998, an indictment named Osama bin Laden and senior al-Qaeda figures, accusing them of orchestrating the embassy bombings. The indictment provided a legal framework for pursuing suspects worldwide and signaled the US's commitment to holding the network accountable through judicial and security measures. The investigation reshaped FBI operations, highlighting the need for rapid overseas deployment, international cooperation, and close collaboration with foreign governments. Counterterrorism became a central focus, influencing resource allocation and response protocols. For those involved, the work remained relentless. Each arrest brought progress, but the conspiracy was deep, and its leadership well insulated. The investigation became assertive, systematic, and global. The 20 days after August 7, 1998, were crucial. While the bomb sites in Nairobi and Dar es Salaam remained active crime scenes, the focus quickly shifted to pursuit. The FBI and partners understood that the longer the delay, the more likely operatives would escape, and evidence would disappear. The priority became identifying and capturing suspects to expose the larger structure behind the attacks. In Kenya, the investigation focused on operational traces left by the Nairobi attack. Vehicle bombings require preparation that leaves contact points, landlords, drivers, and border officials. The FBI and Kenyan authorities aggressively followed these leads, prioritizing witness interviews in areas where suspects had operated. The goal was not a complete narrative but actionable targets. The investigation quickly matured into a coordinated system. Field teams provided information to centralized analysts who compared witness statements, travel records, and forensic evidence. International intelligence from partners added context, leading to a continuous cycle of evidence and intelligence feeding each other. This cycle produced results within 20 days. Mohammed Sadek Oda and Mohammed Rash Daoud al-Awali were arrested in Kenya, demonstrating the vulnerabilities in the conspiracy despite its planning. Their capture confirmed the perpetrators were not faceless, and that the network could be disrupted under coordinated pressure. The arrest revealed the network's structure. Oda and al-Awali were directly tied to the operation, shifting the case from reconstruction to the pursuit of a living network. Their detention marked the start of a new phase, handling evidence, documentation, and legal coordination. Kenyan and U.S. officials coordinated the legal processes for transferring suspects to the U.S. The FBI supported the process while respecting local authority, ensuring that the suspects could be brought to U.S. courts without compromising the case. The arrests raised further questions. Large bombings require more than just those executing the attack. They need planners, facilitators, and leaders. Investigators pushed to identify these higher layers, using information from the arrests to map the broader network. In the weeks following the bombings, evidence recovery continued relentlessly. In Nairobi, teams sifted through debris, uncovering buried fragments and items that could link the attack to procurement routes and staging locations. The focus remained on transitioning from physical evidence to human accountability. Victim identification in Nairobi remained slow and emotionally intense due to the large number of fatalities. Disaster victim identification teams applied forensic methods to ensure accuracy and defendability. This work anchored the case in verified human cost, forming the foundation for future charges and historical record. In Dar es Salaam, investigators continued documenting blast damage, recognizing that the bombing was part of the same coordinated operation. Despite the lower casualties, it remained a significant attack on a U.S. embassy, and the evidence helped understand the network's methods and reach. The bombings killed 224 people, including 12 Americans, and injured over 4,500. The majority of victims were Kenyan civilians, highlighting the humanitarian impact and reinforcing the attack's brutal scope. The investigation unfolded under the weight of these casualties and visible community damage. By day 20, the investigation reached a psychological threshold. Arrests showed that the perpetrators could be identified and captured, and evidence recovery and victim identification were organized. The case had grown into a global hunt for a network identified as al-Qaeda. This moment marked the shift from the bombings as an event to an ongoing confrontation. While Ode and al-Awali were in custody, the network remained active and dispersed. The FBI had proven its ability to operate overseas, and the investigation now focused on moving up the chain to identify planners, facilitators, and leaders before the network could regroup. The momentum from the 20 days was now directed toward fully exposing the conspiracy and achieving justice. After the arrests in Kenya, the investigation shifted to prevent further escape and identify the full structure behind the bombings. The FBI and international partners accelerated efforts to locate additional suspects outside East Africa before the network could reorganize. By early September 1998, the investigation expanded into Europe, where arrests would reveal the full scope of the conspiracy. Europe was a key operational space for al-Qaeda, offering anonymity, mobility, and fewer barriers for movement. The FBI methodically identified potential locations and coordinated with local authorities to quickly detain suspects before they disappeared. In September 1998, the arrest of Mamdouh Mahfoud Salim in Germany marked a breakthrough. Salim's capture connected the embassy bombings to a broader al-Qaeda network. His arrest demonstrated the investigation shift from the execution layer to higher-level facilitators and leadership. The arrest required immediate evidence discipline. Coordinating with German authorities, the FBI ensured evidence was gathered lawfully and documented correctly, knowing it would be used in U.S. courts. Any procedural misstep could jeopardize the case later. Salim's arrest confirmed the operational depth of the conspiracy. It showed that the bombings were part of a coordinated international operation, requiring training, funding, and leadership. The arrest broadened the investigation from local execution to global facilitation, supporting the case that the bombings were part of a larger conspiracy. As the investigation expanded, the analytical workload intensified. Each new arrest brought potential documents, contacts, and travel histories, helping strengthen the conspiracy case. Analysts worked to integrate these leads into KENBOM and TANBOM frameworks, but the process required constant verification to avoid false leads. The US government's response continued alongside the investigation. The August 20 cruise missile strikes disrupted al-Qaeda, but the criminal investigation remained critical for long-term accountability by removing operatives, seizing resources, and creating legal pressure. The European dimension highlighted the importance of international cooperation. Germany's role in Salaam's arrest showed that effective counterterrorism relies on host nation willingness to act. The FBI navigated local legal thresholds to integrate international actions into the US prosecutorial narrative. Europe provided new leads, but also revealed the network's flexibility. Al-Qaeda's ability to operate across borders showed how difficult dismantling the organization would be. The embassy bombing investigation mapped the network, but each arrest was just an entry point into deeper layers of the conspiracy. FBI operations in East Africa remained active as evidence recovery continued at the Nairobi and Dar es Salaam sites. Alongside ongoing victim identification efforts, the FBI's large presence signaled that the bombings would be treated as prosecutable global crimes, not fading tragedies. The investigation began developing a formal legal framework, focusing on presenting the bombings as a conspiracy case. Conspiracy charges allowed investigators to connect bomb builders, facilitators, financiers, and planners into a single structure. Arrests like Salaam's showed the case extended beyond East Africa, involving al-Qaeda's broader network. In September, the investigation's US connections became more prominent. The FBI's domestic efforts intensified, scrutinizing suspects with ties to the US. The bombings were no longer just attacks abroad. They were part of a global network, with connections within the US, reshaping counterterrorism priorities. By September 1998, the investigation expanded beyond East Africa, as investigators realized that al-Qaeda's network operated through ordinary systems, like immigration, housing, and financial channels, enabling members to move undetected. This understanding was confirmed with the arrest of Wadi El-Hay, a US-based individual connected to the broader conspiracy. El-Hay's arrest was operationally significant. He was arrested for making false statements during questioning, which in terrorism cases often indicates deeper involvement. This arrest not only provided legal grounds for action, but also pivoted the investigation toward US-connected elements of the network. El-Hay's capture broadened the case's jurisdiction, introduced new evidence within the US, and increased urgency due to the confirmed presence of terrorist elements within American communities. It reinforced the conclusion that al-Qaeda operated as a distributed network, not a single cell. With the investigation now on US soil, every action had to be precise. Due to intense legal scrutiny, investigators quickly secured records of travel, communications, and financial activity to build a traceable narrative of the conspiracy. The FBI's analytical teams managed an expanding body of evidence. The arrest of Salaam in Germany extended the investigation into Europe, while El-Hay's arrest connected international leads to US territory. The task was to integrate all the information into a comprehensive map of the network. Building connections was challenging due to al-Qaeda's compartmentalized structure. Investigators used corroborated data, phone contacts, travel overlaps, and financial behaviors to link individuals and identify facilitators, turning indirect patterns into the backbone of the conspiracy case. Prosecutors began preparing a technically complex and historically significant case. They needed to prove that the bombings were part of a conspiracy led by al-Qaeda, using a mix of technical reconstruction, documentary evidence, and testimonies linking defendants to the planning, logistics, and command. Each arrest added strength to this case. El-Hay's arrest demonstrated how incremental charges kept legal pressure on the network. Though his arrest for false statements appeared minor, it allowed investigators to secure custody and build broader charges. This method, crucial in complex terrorism cases, enabled early action without waiting for complete evidence. By late 1998, the embassy bombing investigation had become one of the largest counterterrorism cases in US history. With arrests in Kenya, Germany, and the US, the FBI's overseas deployment reached unprecedented scale. Evidence recovery, victim identification, and international cooperation formed a cohesive operational system, all leading to a focus on formalizing leadership responsibility through indictment. By autumn 1998, the embassy bombings investigation had grown into a sprawling case, spanning continents and legal systems. The task was now to transform years of planning and thousands of data points into a formal legal instrument, a comprehensive indictment, to define responsibility at the highest level and confront the network behind the attacks. The challenge was unprecedented. Terrorism prosecutions of this scale were rare, and the embassy bombings tested assumptions about criminal accountability. The attacks involved operatives in Kenya and Tanzania, but planning and support extended far beyond those countries. Prosecutors needed precision in deciding charges, ensuring the indictment was comprehensive without being speculative. The case was structured around conspiracy law, which which reflected how the bombings were coordinated operations requiring shared intent, logistical support, and command. This allowed prosecutors to hold individuals criminally responsible even if they didn't directly execute the attacks, as long as they participated in the planning and support. Evidence supporting this theory was extensive, but dispersed. Physical evidence from the bomb sites, witness testimony, arrests, and intelligence reports connected key figures and enabled the reconstruction of the conspiracy. Each piece of evidence had to be evaluated for admissibility, especially since not all intelligence can be used in court. Prosecutors faced challenges in separating what could be used in court from what was classified. Intelligence leads had to be corroborated with independent, admissible evidence. Travel records, financial documents, and witness statements became essential for building a reliable case. Attention then turned to al-Qaeda's leadership. The investigation confirmed that the bombings were part of a broader strategy directed by Osama bin Laden and his senior members. The legal theory was that they authorized and coordinated the attacks, even if they didn't personally execute them. Drafting the indictment was a meticulous process. It needed to establish U.S. jurisdiction, explain the conspiracy, and identify defendants and their roles clearly. The evidence had to be defendable in court, ensuring each allegation was supported and legally sound. On November 4, 1998, the U.S. issued an indictment naming Osama bin Laden and members of his network, including Mohammed Atef. The charges outlined their orchestration of the embassy bombings and related acts of terrorism, based on thorough investigation and evidence gathered across multiple countries. The November 4, 1998 indictment marked a turning point, turning the embassy bombings into a formal legal confrontation between the U.S. and al-Qaeda's leadership. The indictment provided a legal basis for continued pursuit of suspects and international cooperation. It established a public record of responsibility that would shape the historical understanding of the attacks. The indictment didn't resolve the threat from al-Qaeda, but marked a critical assertion of legal authority. It framed terrorism as a prosecutable offense, asserting that those responsible would face criminal charges. By autumn 1998, the embassy bombings investigation shifted from a field operation to a legal campaign focused on precision, documentation, and endurance. The challenge was to transform a complex, chaotic event into a verifiable legal record that could withstand cross-examination and long-term scrutiny. The raw numbers, 224 dead, including 12 Americans, and over 4,500 wounded, shaped the legal gravity of the case. The bombings were not isolated acts, but coordinated operations requiring planning, funding, and logistical support, which formed the basis for conspiracy charges that linked al-Qaeda's infrastructure to the attacks. The evidence collected from the bomb sites had to be meticulously documented for trial. Each item, fragments, photographs, witness statements, needed a detailed custody record. This disciplined approach ensured the evidence could withstand court scrutiny, with every action recorded as if it would be presented in court. The case centered in federal court in New York, where prosecutors prepared to demonstrate the coordinated nature of the conspiracy and tie each defendant to the network. Legal decisions about venue and procedure were crucial, as terrorism trials require heightened security and careful handling of sensitive material. The prosecution's approach was layered. First, prove the bombings, then prove al-Qaeda's involvement, and finally demonstrate the defendants' participation. The indictment named key al-Qaeda figures, establishing the embassy attacks as part of a broader conspiracy against U.S. interests abroad. For the defense, the trial was about challenging the connections between the defendants and the bombings. Prosecutors had to present multiple strands of evidence: travel records, communications, physical evidence, and witness testimony to build a case strong enough to withstand defense challenges. The government's narrative began with the bombings themselves. The bomb vehicle stopped at the Nairobi embassy gate and detonated near the perimeter, and the near-simultaneous blast in Dar es Salaam. Photographs and forensic testimony were used not for shock value, but to demonstrate the physical plausibility of the reconstruction. The May 29, 2001 verdict marked the transition from conspiracy narrative to legal fact. The jury convicted the defendants, affirming the prosecution's case. Sentencing, post-trial motions and appeals followed, but the verdict showed that the conspiracy had been proven through admissible evidence. Sentencing on October 18, 2001, brought finality with life sentences for key defendants. Though this occurred after September 11, 2001, it set a precedent for handling international terrorism cases, demonstrating how the justice system could address large-scale conspiracies. The convictions clarified the path from investigation to judgment. Defendants arrested early on in Kenya were convicted, reinforcing that initial charges could be the foundation for broader accountability. The courtroom's reliance on provable evidence made the prosecution's strategy successful. Other figures, like Mahmoud Salaam, illustrated how terrorism investigations unfold into parallel legal realities. His case showed that custody could lead to separate legal challenges, and that the legal system sometimes must address immediate violence while larger charges remain pending. for victims and communities affected by the bombings. The New York courtroom was distant, but its outcomes were meaningful. The sentencing and convictions affirmed that the bombings were crimes against humans, not just geopolitical events. The legal record preserved responsibility, countering time and propaganda, and it became a historical account based on evidence, testimony, and procedure. Institutionally, the embassy bombings prosecution advanced changes within the FBI. KENBOM and TANBOM were the largest FBI deployments at that time, expanding overseas capacity for terrorism investigations. The trial validated that overseas evidence collection and international cooperation could withstand courtroom scrutiny, and that conspiracy frameworks could hold up under emotional weight. The core of the prosecution wasn't institutional change, but the transformation of horror into accountability. The trial showed what happened in Nairobi and Dar es Salaam, proving al-Qaeda's role and each defendant's participation without relying on spectacle or broad generalizations. The trial record mattered because it was a test of the justice system, balancing power and the rights of the accused. The case remained open because key suspects, such as Osama bin Laden and Mohammed Atif, remained beyond reach. The 1998 indictment functioned as a living legal tool, driving international cooperation and operations targeting these figures. Some key figures would never face trial, as the pursuit shifted to covert operations and battlefield actions. The fate of figures tied to the bombings varied: convictions, extraditions, deaths in operations, and unresolved fugitives. The pursuit was uneven, shaped by intelligence, opportunity, and geopolitical conditions. Suspects in cooperative regions were captured, while those in unstable areas were targeted by force. Fazul Abdullah Mohammed, a key al-Qaeda operative linked to the bombings, remained at large for years before being killed in Somalia in 2011. His death at a Mogadishu checkpoint highlighted the unpredictable nature of the pursuit, where timing, local security, and exposure often determined the outcome. Even as the investigation moved into legal proceedings, the manhunt continued, where law enforcement had limited reach, with outcomes shaped by confrontation rather than legal processes. Other fugitives linked to the embassy bombings, like Sheikh Ahmed Salim Swedan, were killed in operations, removing key figures from the network. This ongoing pursuit became a long process of attrition, targeting facilitators and narrowing the network's movement, while keeping pressure on fugitives through indictments and rewards. The case also produced legal outcomes through extraditions, such as in October 2012, when Adel Abdelbari and Khalid Al-Fawaz were transferred to U.S. jurisdiction. This exemplified the persistence of terrorism prosecutions, where years passed between indictment and trial, proving the embassy bombings case was a rare example of continued effort long after the initial shock. The pursuit remained active through public reward systems and wanted posters, emphasizing that certain individuals would remain targets regardless of time. Figures like Saif al-Adel, indicted for his role in the embassy bombings, were featured in U.S. rewards materials. This approach framed the bombings not as a case concluded by early convictions, but as an ongoing pursuit of accountability. The rewards mechanism leveraged human networks, turning fear, greed, and rivalry into sources of information. The embassy bombings, because of their scale and significance, remained a central focus in this system. In later years, the story shifted with reports of senior al-Qaeda figures living under protection or concealment. Abdullah Ahmed Abdullah, Abu Muhammad al-Masri, tied to the bombings, was killed in Tehran in 2020, illustrating the blurred boundary between law enforcement targets and intelligence operations in the war against al-Qaeda. His death, whether seen as an assassination or counter-terror operation, underscored how the embassy bombings case continued to echo, drawing senior figures into accountability, even when courtroom capture was impossible. The legal record of the case also revealed how detention could generate new violence and complicate prosecution. Mamdo Mohammed Salim, arrested in 1998, became notorious for attacking a federal corrections officer in 2000 while in custody. This demonstrated how detention does not neutralize ideology or desperation, but shifts risk to controlled spaces, complicating prosecution. The embassy bombings investigation became a branching legal ecosystem with many proceedings, rather than a single trial. The embassy bombings case evolved into a framework holding multiple stories: devastation in Nairobi and Dar es Salaam, rapid overseas deployment, early arrests, indictment of senior leadership, convictions, extraditions, and a decades-long manhunt. The core facts remain stable. The August 7, 1998 bombings, 224 dead, and thousands wounded. The case shaped the FBI's counter-terror posture, reflecting the complexity of international politics, intelligence, and operational opportunity. And it remained a central focus in the pursuit of justice. The embassy bombings case, though shaped by local grief and disruption in Kenya and Tanzania, ensured the victims were at the center of a criminal case, not just geopolitical rhetoric. Legal outcomes in New York, manhunts, and life sentences for the convicted reflected the scale of harm. Over time, the pursuit evolved from evidence recovery to covert operations, arrests, extraditions, and lethal actions against senior figures. The case demonstrated that terrorism investigations don't end with one capture, but move through stages of narrowing. Fewer fugitives, fewer safe corridors. The long pursuit couldn't reverse the destruction, but it imposed continuity, ensuring the bombings were remembered through legal processes. It named perpetrators, secured convictions, and maintained pressure through extradition and public rewards, making sure the story would not fade into anonymity. When the last formal sentences were imposed, and the courtroom doors closed, the embassy bombings didn't fade as a closed case, but instead settled as an unresolved point in time. August 7, 1998. Despite evolving governments, counterterrorism strategies and wars, the bombings remained a fixed moment where the modern confrontation with transnational terrorism began. The legal record was clear. 2 truck bombs struck U.S. embassies, killing 224 people, including 12 Americans, and wounding over 4,500. The majority of the dead were local civilians. The investigations, KENBOM and TANBOM, marked the largest FBI overseas deployment, with arrests, indictments, trials, convictions, and life sentences, forming a documented chain of accountability. But the case's impact went beyond court rulings. It forced institutions to confront their vulnerabilities. The bombings shattered assumptions about terrorism being contained and demonstrated that organizations could execute large-scale operations far from their bases. The FBI was no longer solely focused on domestic crime. It transformed its approach to terrorism, integrating lessons from KENBOM and TANBOM into its operations, expanding overseas presence, and making counterterrorism a core mission. The embassy bombings prosecution proved that complex terrorism cases could be handled through the criminal justice system, setting a precedent for post-9/11 cases. It showed that criminal law could work alongside military and intelligence actions. Despite institutional changes, the human cost remained. In Nairobi, physical scars faded, but personal and social scars endured. Families felt distant from justice, highlighting how terrorism often harms those least connected to the conflict. The bombings prompted changes in diplomatic security, with increased focus on perimeter distance, blast mitigation, and host nation coordination. Embassies became seen not only as places of negotiation, but as targets, altering how diplomacy and security coexisted. For investigators, the embassy bombings were a defining experience that taught the importance of restraint and documentation. It showed that investigations depend on careful documentation as much as urgency, as future legal scrutiny would examine every decision made under pressure. While the victims' names may not always be remembered publicly, the legal system's legitimacy was built on recognizing individual harm. Each identification and personal effect cataloged contributed to a record that anchored the bombings and human loss. The embassy bombings did not produce a clean ending, but resulted in multiple outcomes: convictions, life sentences, continued fugitives, institutional reform, and a reshaped understanding of terrorism response. It demonstrated that systems could adapt without abandoning their principles. The measure of the case was not whether it eliminated al-Qaeda, but whether it imposed consequences for the bombings. The investigation named responsibility, and punishment was imposed where possible. The embassies in Nairobi and Dar es Salaam became part of a permanent ledger of accountability. Years later, what remained was not closure, but continuity. The case's continuity and legal accountability, memory, and institutional change underscored the commitment to fight transnational violence through evidence, law, and the refusal to forget. Like, share, and subscribe to stay with the mystery crime for new cases.